Hi, everyone. I'm Mpamira, and welcome to the Soft Edit. Today's guest is Dr. Tabitha Mpamira, who is a friend of mine and a brilliant, brilliant doctor that has done a lot of work and research in trauma. So I'm excited to talk to you today a lot about what softness means. And given that we're calling this the Soft Edit, how do you unpack trauma, unpack the hard, and get to the soft? Because I feel like that is hard work. And I don't know how to do it, which is why you're here. Thank you and welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. This is going to be really fun and hard to do this as a serious thing because we're here, but it doesn't have to be. So we're going to show up authentically.
Yes.
And I'm excited.
It's going to be super fun.
Part of this, yes. Let's go.
So I'm going to start by asking you to introduce yourself and tell the community a little bit about who you are, the work you've done, and then we'll get into it.
Of course. I'm Tabitha, and I think that question of who you are, I always start with...
It's a difficult one.
It is, right? We all jump into the roles we play. So I try to separate about who I am and the roles and the hats I wear.
Ooh,
So I am a mother of 3. I have twin girls who are 12 and a 13-year-old son. I play roles in my work as a psychologist and also a nonprofit founder and CEO of Mpamira Global Healing, where we work to transform trauma and trauma healing and also ending childhood sexual violence. I am a global citizen. I'm both East African and living in the US currently, but I'm here in Nairobi doing this. What? This is so exciting. So yeah, I play all those roles. I'm a sister, I'm a daughter, I'm a friend, I'm a community organizer, all the roles I play, but that make me who I am or how I show up in the world.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that like differentiation of like the roles you play versus who you are. That's beautiful.
Thank you.
So I want to talk a little bit about what softness means, because I think when people think about the word soft, it's become maybe a bit singular. It's become very commercialized. I think it's been stripped of a lot of meaning and a lot of layers. So I'm curious from your perspective what it means to you. And then I'm also happy to share what it means to me and why I'm trying to do this work.
Yeah. And so social media with all its wonderfulness,
Yeah.
it also influences how we use these words, what we think of them. But to me, right, just like self-care, everybody has one way of this. To me, softness can be defined very differently based on the person. So there is no one way to do that.
Yeah.
So with me, it started with freeing myself of other people's opinions, freeing myself of musts, shoulds, have tos, grace for myself, gratitude for what is, and also giving myself permission to mess up, to correct, to have joy unapologetically. And most importantly, this was the hardest for me that I just now started getting to, is to rest. And not as a way of earning it, but as a right, as a part of my life. So that's been what I've defined my softness to be. Keeping myself out of anything and everything that does not bring joy, that does not bring peace. In my nervous system, all our nervous systems know these things. Yeah. It is our brain, the logical part that gets in the way. So letting myself trust me more, what I need, what I want, unapologetically me.
I love that.
In my wholeness.
Yeah. I love that, especially the piece about rest. Because I think as women, we're so programmed to think we have to earn things and we have to show up a certain way. We have to be perfect. Everything has to be together. And mistakes, as we were talking about, mistakes and challenges that kind of knock us off course we're not very forgiving with ourselves. We really just like sit in it and we chastise ourselves, even if it's just like a part of the journey.
Right. Human experience.
Literally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, at least in the thought and definition of softness and in everything you shared, I feel like softness actually takes a lot of violence for us.
Cool.
Yeah, I
Say
know. Which is stark because obviously
Yeah.
soft has this very warm, glowy, fuzzy connotation.
Mm-hmm.
But I think to be soft, it actually does take a lot of violence because it means breaking down walls, unlearning patterns, which is aggressive and it's hard. And unlearning things like we are sort of systematized to feel or do, even if we don't know why we're doing them, which is just wild. But it's actually something that, yeah, that takes a lot of initiative. It takes a lot of strength. And I hate when people associate softness with weakness because it's not. It's strength. It's work. And I can't speak for the male experience, although I'm sure to a degree some of it is similar. Unpacking and allowing yourself to be all of those things actually takes violence a little bit and takes strength to come out on the other side and rewire, repattern. I'm not the psychologist that you are.
So we're all living this experience and learning from it. So whether it is personal or in a classroom, it all informs this. And as you were saying that, I think in such a visual way.
Yeah.
I was thinking about, I love water as an analogy of this, right? That it can be in all forms. And water can be violent. It can be smooth in a river. It can also be ice.
Yeah.
And for ice, it has to melt, right? Or you break it. And the softness is letting yourself just be in the form you're meant to be in. And sometimes, depending on where you are in that journey, you have to let that process work its way out for you to get back to that. And it can fit in any vessel. It just flows, right? But it depends on how it came to be what it is for it to go back to its form. Like, let's be water.
Yeah.
And just allow the things to happen.
Yeah. Learning how to be water.
Yeah.
It's wild.
In the way you were meant to be.
I know. That's beautiful.
Acceptance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. That's beautiful. Absolutely gonna use that. I told you I use Tabitha's quotes a lot because they're fantastic.
I feel like you're hyping me up a lot today.
They're fantastic. I love them. And you have another quote that I absolutely love, which I heard in your TEDx talk in 2019, which brings us to our next topic. Trauma that is not transformed is transferred. So to the kind of the notion of softness requiring you to unpack, unlearn, and also really deal with your trauma, whatever it looks like. I'm just curious, like, how does someone start? Because I think that is the most challenging question. And I guess I'm also would love to get your take on what causes people to start.
To start?
Yeah.
Oh. Okay.
What causes people to start?
How much time do we have?
All day. We have all day.
Let's go. No, that's a great question, right? So what makes people start is so different from everyone, right? And I think that's the problem I have with social media, mental health talks.
Yeah, fair.
It's usually very prescriptive. In this one person's experience, they come out and say it as it's the only way. And sometimes it is people feeling isolated, or they can be part of this, or that they are part of something that they're really not.
Yeah.
So first and foremost is your context. And so where we start for everyone is so different. So I'll get a little vulnerable here and speak on how I started.
Yeah.
if that's what this is supposed to be.
Yes,
Like,
we
you
would
always
love
get the
that.
whole me. That's part of life. And so I'm Rwandan, and the genocide that happened in our country, and growing up as a refugee and moving to another country as a teenager. So there's a lot of identity stuff and trauma that unspoken, and I always wanted to learn psychology for that purpose. So it's like my teacher, and this was in high school, they said something about psychology being the healing of the mind. And that was the first time I heard of that concept as a 15-year-old.
Yeah.
And I couldn't put a finger on it, but I knew my people needed some kind of healing that's beyond physical after what we had been through. And fast forward, I started learning about that, thinking this is for my people, not me. I'm good. And
As we always
as
think,
we all
I'm
are.
good. I'm perfect.
Until we're not. And so I didn't realize I had my own stuff that I was putting in the back. Our brains know how to protect us. When you're not ready, it will lock it away.
Oof.
And sometimes it will show up those triggers. They will surprise you. So fast forward, I've been a therapist for over 5, 7 some years. I go to Uganda to volunteer, and I ask these teachers about this. What can I do as somebody who's mental therapist in this community that had a lot of trauma? And nonchalantly, they're like, "Oh, there is this kid in class. She was assaulted yesterday." Trigger warning. I won't share any details, but just to say that. And nobody did anything, because either it's normalized, there's nothing, there's a helplessness and all of that. So I was starting to talk to this little girl, and it turns out it wasn't even the first time, and there were more who came forward. And that was the moment my own brain unlocked that I too had been a survivor. Not that I didn't know, it was never in my consciousness. Yeah. At that age, looking at a little girl in Uganda at this exact time, and I realized I had never done my own work, but had been trying to help others heal. Yeah. And for the first time, when I returned to Michigan, anybody who knows me knows, like, we're not going to have 2 conversations without me asking if you've been to therapy, and how we all should go to therapy. But I had never gone to therapy myself. The hypocrisy, right? Because I'm like, I know what they're going to do and say. I can heal myself. That is so not true, but that's for a different time. But so my starting point was a reflection of somebody who looks like me at the age I was when my trauma began. And that opened that moment for me in my brain of like, you have stuff. And so what I was running away from, I was also running toward in my work, but not connecting it to the why. And so every one of us have that. We have a different moment. Some people it's grief. Some people it's a huge life change, like divorce. That's a whole different story too. I'm healing around that too. Some people it is a financial crisis. It could be having children. That is another big moment that, especially for us women, you're like, I'm supposed to now teach these kids a better life than I had, or give them skills I didn't have. And that usually wakes us up into, oh, I need to reparent myself. Yeah. Or marriage. Anyway, so it's different for everyone. So the second part to that story of where do I start? Yeah. The one place that we all have to start in order to do this well is acceptance. Mm. Accepting that this happened, not my fault, but my responsibility, because my life is my responsibility. And to accepting all the parts of you, what you had to do to survive, not judging it, not shaming yourself for it, because those survival skills helped you get here. Yeah. And a lot of us are usually fighting. That's the conflicts in doing this work well. It's not about changing myself to be better. It's to accept and receive and hold all the parts of me, especially the ones we don't want to look at. The ones we think make us less than. The ones we think people would not like us if they knew exactly who I was, what I do, how I had to survive. It's when we invite all parts of us that had to do what they had to do to survive, healing begins.
Oh, wow. I love that. And that was beautiful. And I think that's the part that most people struggle with. And
Yeah.
it's a part that I've struggled with, to be honest, because it's exactly what you said. You don't know what you don't know what you don't know until you know. And it's a shock to your system to figure out that you've been carrying something for so long. And it's also a shock when you realize that the way you are carrying it isn't working anymore.
Mm. Ooh, yes.
Right?
Right?
Yeah.
Yes.
It actually feels insane.
Yes.
Because like you're moving, at least for me, I was motivated deeply by a fear of failure.
Mm.
Because I wanted to be more than like the traumatic experiences I'd been through. I didn't connect those experiences. I didn't know it was coming from that. I just kind of moved with this like big fear of failure.
Mm.
And now looking back, the one thing I realized that was a mistake or that was a symptom, was that I couldn't sit and be with myself. Like I could never be alone, which sounds crazy to me now because I love being
Healing.
right. Yeah, the word,
Right.
literally. But yeah, there was a time where I literally could not stand to sit by myself at home with my feelings and with what I'm dealing with. Like I describe it as like my whole world was external.
Mhm.
Nothing was happening inside me. It was all about the things happening around me because I couldn't sit in what was happening inside me. But I didn't know that that's not how life is supposed to be,
Yeah.
which sounds ridiculous, but it's true.
Mhm.
That was the only way I knew how to live. I
Mhm.
didn't know anything else or anything different.
Ooh, and I think you bring up two good points there too.
You three.
I think my brain wants to say three, and I was like, no, keep it at two. And then I was like, no. Eternal conflict. No, one, right, is carrying everything
Yeah.
and until it's no longer working, right? And some people, right, I think I saw this saying of just because I carry it well doesn't mean it's not heavy.
Oof, yeah.
And the patterns we create to survive or to manage, like what you just mentioned with perfectionism, sometimes those are celebrated in society.
They are, yeah.
And with the why, so it's never the behavior, it's why it's there. And so most people are the people pleasing. That was my thing, right? That was a survival thing, safety, right? The brain is only concerned about what's safe and how do we make it efficient. So when I am the friend that everybody can count on to get all the vacations planned.
Yeah.
When at my work I'm pulling late hours and turning in work on time and there are no mistakes.
Yeah.
Nobody's gonna point out like, how are you doing? How are you handling that? I'm like, oh no, we love her. We're giving you a promotion. We're inviting you on all the trips, right? And then that keeps promoting those patterns until we realize, but who is this serving? And why? And when it stops being in service of your well-being, of your healing, then we notice, okay, that's not all bad, but we get to have agency on when and decide when and how we use it and why. So it's no longer a safety thing. It's more of, not control. I don't like the word control. It's agency.
Yeah.
I decide when I want to do this or that or not. Yeah. Those are great.
You're breaking my brain because that's I love that. And it's true.
Yeah.
That is exactly how it works.
And that's the hardest one for people to notice. It's when the rest of the world is celebrating you, but inside you can't even, like you said, sit with it. Again, why therapy is important.
I know.
None of us
Shout out
can
to therapy. Everybody
Shout out.
It's true. It's true. It's true. And actually, when I went to therapy for the first time, that's exactly like what happened to me, which was like my first therapy session is actually when I figured out something was wrong. Because I knew something was wrong because I was just like exhausted by myself. Like I was exhausted with who I was.
Mm.
And I didn't find any joy in anything anymore. And it was a real challenge. To just exist, it was a real challenge. So I went to therapy. I remember telling my therapist, and true to form, everything was external. I walk into my first therapy session and I tell her about everything that happened around me.
Yeah.
All of the things that happened around me, all the people around me, all the things they did, nothing about myself. And at the end of the session, I was like, yeah, so like, everybody else is clearly the problem. Like, I'm good. All is well with me. Everybody else was the problem, but I've got it. I'm dealing with it. I'm cool. Everything's good. And she just looked at me. She smiled and she said, bullshit.
Good.
I know.
My kind of therapist.
Which really just like disrupted something in me. And she was the first person to kind of say, like, all of the things you're going through, all of the things you're managing, the way that you're existing, it's coming from something.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just like how everybody else is living. This is not how everybody else is living. It's a pattern that's been learned from something. And it blew my mind. And I swear after that moment I saw everything differently.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
But there is this period of time, at least for me, where you've recognized and realized this old version of yourself isn't serving you anymore. But you don't know what a new version looks like. And you don't know what new patterns look like. And I'm just curious, like, what should people do when they're in that? And then kind of related, when you sit and reflect on your own behavior, on the things you've done while you were in this survival mode, before you could have this level of self-awareness or accountability. I know for a lot of people, myself included, there's a lot of guilt. There's a lot of grief because you're mourning who you used to be. There's a lot of confusion because you don't understand how to be anymore. And I guess it's a difficult question. I'm going to throw it at you.
It's a big one.
Yeah. How do you release it?
So I go about this a little differently than what we've come to think of as doing this healing work.
Yeah.
And I don't know who said this. I never remember anybody who says this, but I remember what they say. It's so profound, right?
That's important.
It's war begins at defense, right?
Ooh.
And internally,
Yeah.
when we start to think, I need fixing, then I'm at war with who I used to be, or who I used to be is at war with who I want to be, or who I am right now.
Yeah.
That already brings up more turmoil, right? Internally. Because now I have to fix, I have to fight, I have to change. Versus the way self-compassion is so huge in how I do my work.
Yeah.
So if I'm accepting of what happened, and I realize this was a human, I'm human having a human experience. The only constant thing in life is change. I start looking at it curiously versus aggressively. Like, I wonder what this would feel like for me.
Yeah.
And that gives me space to either experiment with what that is versus I'm doing it right or wrong.
Yeah.
I always teach my clients to reframe this as, is it helpful or unhelpful? And there's another piece that is cultural, actually globally cultural, around certain emotions being negative or positive. And we need these emotions to inform us on how we move into the world. Yeah. So what would our world be? Where would we be as humans if we couldn't access anxiety? What would happen to us? It's an actual question to you. What would that look? What would you not be able to get done or do, or just as humanity? if we didn't have anxiety at all.
Oh, so much more.
Right.
Yeah.
We wouldn't meet a deadline to save our lives, some of us maybe. We would get in all kinds of messes because we wouldn't fear things, right? So we would get hurt a lot.
Oh, that's a good point.
Or anger.
Yeah.
So if somebody's trying to steal my purse on the street,
Yeah.
and all I can access is joy and empathy, I'm like, get you go. I just need this. You need a hug as you're trying to harm me, right? That's not helpful in that moment.
Oh, wow.
I need anger. I need enough things to help me fight or flee so I can be safe. So in that moment, that's helpful emotion.
I've never thought about it like that.
Nobody does.
Yeah,
right?
Immediately when you said if anxiety was not in your life, I was like, oh, I would be so much happier. But you're right.
Yeah.
Then nothing would get done.
Nothing gets done. You wouldn't know what's good and bad for you in terms of, right? We feel a little anxious or fear.
Yeah, there would be no radar.
Right. Yeah. And if we think, I won't even go down that road, right? So if we stay here and look at guilt, you mentioned guilt and shame. Those are not bad things. I know a lot of people could use a little shame in the world. We will not go political.
Fair.
Right?
Fair.
It helps us be better humans for each other.
Yeah.
When it's helpful. When it's unhelpful, right? We know shame says you're bad and guilt says you're doing a bad thing.
Yeah.
We need that to guide behavior to be moral and ethical humans.
I love that. And that's a beautiful point. But how do we make it helpful? Because I think, especially as women, a lot of us get stuck in just like chastising ourselves or making ourselves miserable because we did something wrong. We made a mistake. We weren't as good or as great as we should have been.
So that's where the relearning comes in. Is that if I feel shame or guilt, it's automatically bad. I need to fix it. I need to get rid of it, and I need to be joyful. I'm sad. Oh my gosh, now I'm depressed, and I need to be happy all the time. Yeah. So that's what I want us to flip, where we get agency back, right? Emotions are indicators of what's happening around us, not dictators of our behaviors. So that's where I encourage and work with clients to gain agency over these emotions. And what does that look like? You come to me with information of, you know what, you should really be afraid of sitting here and talking to people because they're going to criticize you and then the comments are going to be bad. Da, 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 da. You're telling me that from your experience of public speaking. All right. And so then it's my job to say, well, thanks for that information. Yeah. I'm sure it's valid for you, right? And then it's like, but for me, in this moment, I'm sitting across a friend. I don't even know how many people watch. I probably will never check those comments. Yeah. It's more meaningful. I'm doing this from a different why. It's to be with my friend talking about things we care about and da da da. So your information is not invalid, but it's not applicable. Or it's not helpful for me right now, right before a podcast, right? So then I decide what I do with that. Yeah. So in that moment of shame, if shame comes to me, I literally, we will do like a visual with my clients and give either faces or something, or we use we use different things to represent all these emotions and people in our lives and the things that inform how we see the world and ourselves, so that we can notice that this is outside of us. Yeah. Most of us are like, oh, I am this because I feel it. Thoughts and feelings are not who we are. Ooh. They're all informants. So when we separate ourselves from those two things, now I can say, hold on, shame is saying that I'm not good enough. Yeah. It's its job, right? At its most helpful, it's doing a great job to tell me. Yeah. Right? And so if I really have truly harmed a friend, shame's got a point. But then it's still my job to say, so what do I need to do with that? I'm taking my power back. Yeah. I don't have to sit in it. I just take the message and decide, okay, if I did something terrible, I will go apologize. And now shame will be quiet because we did the thing. And if it's something that happened to me, like sexual violence is a big thing where shame comes in. Now I can say, what is shame saying about this, about me? I can now step back and say, oh, actually, no, somebody else harmed me. It's not for me to hold. But thank you, though, because society has told us we should. You're letting me know, but that's not helpful right now. Now I can release. Bless and release is one of my mantras. Right? Or now anxiety is telling me you should really freak out about this podcast because what if you don't say the right things? I'm like, thanks, anxiety.
Yeah.
But I don't need to because this is authentic conversation.
I
appreciate the message. Not helpful right before podcast.
Yeah.
Bless and release. And the more we practice that, it is a practice.
Yeah.
We start getting our power back over our thoughts, the messaging we get as women, as African women. That's how we need to show up.
Yeah.
We can say like, oh, I can literally hear my mom say, oh, look how you're sitting, right? Sometimes we're like, oh, okay. Is it helpful? She had context.
Yeah.
That's how she was raised.
Yeah.
Doesn't make it wrong or right. It's the extremes, the polar opposites in the way the brain makes everything to be black and white. But life is gray. All of it is in the gray. So it's getting our power back to say, how do I meet myself in the middle? And I'm the boss.
Yeah.
Of the thoughts and the emotions.
Yeah. I love that. I like that notion that feelings and emotions are informants.
Yeah.
Because I feel like in society today, everybody glorifies, and even with social media, right? Everybody's glorifying all the things that are going great. They're glorifying joy. For the most part, they're showing you the best part of their lives. And you start to think if you have all of those other feelings, that you're broken.
You're broken.
Something's wrong with you.
Yeah.
When in reality, all of those feelings are normal, but more importantly, to what you're saying, they're useful.
Very useful.
That's wild.
Yes.
Like, and I don't think a lot of people think that way or like know it in that framework that like your feelings are useful. They're trying to tell you something. And it's your job to decide whether or not.
Helpful or not.
Wow. You blew my mind. No, seriously. No, seriously. And that's beautiful. And if people watch this, I hope that's the one thing that they take away, that your feelings are informants.
Yes.
And you get to decide.
You decide what you do with it.
Yeah.
And we always think our behaviors are these automatic things out of our feelings. We can be angry and decide not to yell, right? Like we've all been angry with our bosses or somebody with more power.
Yeah.
And we smile. Right inside, you're like, right? But like, I hear you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great point.
Right. Okay. I'll take that in consideration. Right? And then get angry with a partner or a child and say the meanest things and scream and do the things. Same emotion.
Yeah.
You decide where it's safe to display certain behaviors. So we're not helpless toward what we do. We all can show up differently when something else is at risk. Yeah. It's in the safest places, especially in relationships, that we let our emotions dictate how we show up. Or that we start to say, well, but you made me do it, or you were the, no. So when we take accountability, change happens, even for ourselves. And so when we're sad, like, oh, I should be joyful, I should be happy, look at all these other people smiling, versus, okay, I feel sad. What do I need? Self-compassion starts to say, whatever feeling I'm having, how do I show up for it?
Yeah.
For myself. What is it telling me?
Yeah.
What do I need to do? Just agency. I group all therapeutic interventions into 3. For me, that's made it simpler to explain to people. So it's awareness. That's where we're aware of how our trauma has created these patterns, or how our upbringing, religion, culture,
family.
Right, each one can have its own segment, right? But most of these are so ingrained that we forget it's actually, we don't question it. We don't stop to question. Yeah. So when we're aware of how all these things inform how we show up, the patterns, and we notice them, it helps us now get into agency, that we're no longer automatically, just as we're programmed and sent out in the world, right? We're all programmed for this 18 years by school, by teachers, parents, all of the things. Yeah. And now we have agency to decide what serves me, what doesn't. How do I want to show up? And the last one is action. So just because I know things are happening, and I hear this a lot with the younger folk, like, or even with all adults, like, I know I'm always so dramatic. Oh, I always, right, like just because you know doesn't make it okay.
Yeah.
Oh, because you name it.
Yeah.
You still don't have to be, I will not cuss on the school podcast, right? So just because we're aware and we know we can change, we choose not to, well, we're not changing, we're choosing.
Yeah.
So that's the agency. And then action is then what am I going to do differently? And if I want to,
Yeah.
and why? Then that's where we go. So awareness, agency, action.
Three A's.
All can do the 3 A's. Triple A.
Yeah, look at that. Yeah,
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
I feel like, and I feel like you get to different stages at different points in your journey because it definitely starts with awareness.
Mm-hmm.
And wherever awareness comes from, whatever shock happens in your life, that you get to awareness.
Yes.
But I love that point, which is like what you're not changing. You're choosing.
Yes.
Because you're right. A lot of people kind of, and now with social media and with therapy kind of being commoditized, everybody shows up and they're like, yeah, like actually I know this about myself. I know I'm a selfish person, or
Yeah.
like, yeah, it's like I've been through, like someone broke my heart, and so like now I have avoidant attachment, and this is my whole life now. They miss the last step. They miss action, and it's like they're kind of like glorifying a little bit
But
where they are, which I struggle with, because I'm like, yeah, and then what? Like, what are you changing? How are you moving? How are you evolving?
right. That's
Is
been the struggle.
Yeah.
So because I have depression
Yeah.
or ADHD, now I can't come to meetings on time because I have ADHD. No. We have these groupings of terms to identify a certain symptoms to give you tools so that you can live the life you want to live in a society that we all don't get to control.
Yeah.
We wish we could. We wish we had all kinds of flexibility that you turn in your assignment 3 years from now and it's okay, but we don't. So saying that I'm not going to do the things I need to do because I have this or because I struggle with this, and I'm not saying that without empathy, it's going to be harder, but you're coming to learn the tools to live the life, not use that as an excuse to keep you stuck.
Yeah.
And it all comes down to what life do you want to live? Right? That's usually the question, my first question in consulting with a client is if we wave this magic wand
Yeah.
and everything that you struggle with went away, what kind of life do you want to have? Then we work backwards, say, what do you need to make that happen?
Yeah.
So if we say we want a soft life, well, however you define that,
Yeah.
and this is, I'm speaking about myself now, I'm always talking about wanting to slow down.
Yeah.
Because overworking was my other escape too, right?
Same.
Right? I
You
mean,
recognize gay.
exactly. But then here I am overscheduling myself again every week.
Yeah.
Like, oh, but that's who I am. This is why I get. But I'm exhausted. I'm depleted. I'm all of that. And I say I want the thing, but my behavior is taking me toward the thing or away.
Yeah.
So I started weighing little tiny decisions toward or away. If this is the thing I say I want, and our values, there our pain lies. So I value time with family, but if I don't have any, then I start getting that conflict.
Ooh.
Right? If boundaries, oh God. So if I don't want to make you mad and saying no because this is the thing, and right, and now I can say, okay, well, waking up early to do this podcast gives me joy.
Yeah.
Is it in alignment with my values?
Yeah.
And if I can say yes,
Mm.
now it's no longer about your feelings, it's about my alignment. And it makes it easier to make decisions.
Yeah.
Identify with the thing you say you want, then your agency and action have to be in alignment with taking you closer and toward. It's much easier. It'll be better for you to go slow toward the right direction. It gets way more expensive and harder to return from a wrong direction. So even if it's one step,
True.
that today you say, this is the life I want.
Yeah.
And you do only one thing a day that takes you a little bit the right direction.
Yeah.
Healing begins.
Oh, I love that. And it's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because we think we have to do it all at the same time. Okay, now I'm going to go work out at 5 a.m. and I'm going to do the things. No.
And if I don't do those things, then I'm not.
I failed.
Worthy.
Yeah.
When realistically, you're the one who's defining what worthy looks like for you. It comes from you. You get to decide.
Say that again.
Agency. That's going to be my new catchphrase. Just like agency.
Yeah.
Start saying agency.
That's it.
I love that.
That's it.
There's another side to healing that I want to talk about, which is what it costs you.
Ugh.
I know. It's not fun, but it's true. It does cost you a lot. And for me, at least in my experience, but I'm curious to hear from you, your experience, and then also like what you've seen. Healing costs you whenever you're on this path of healing. And I think especially when you've started it, when you've hit your awareness, you're trying to turn it into agency. What happens a lot of the time is there's a lot of shock of emotions, right? For me, the biggest one was guilt around how I handled things in the past. And I know it's something that everybody who has gotten through all of the steps into action and is doing different, choosing different in their present, sits in a bit of regret over the past and sits in a bit of guilt over the past as well. Especially because we enter these journeys at different times.
Yes.
Healing forces you to confront that, and it forces you to stare at it, and it sucks. Like it really, really sucks. How do you move forward from that? How do you make peace with it, I guess? How do you forgive yourself? Even when other people don't forgive you. Because hurt people, as we know.
As we know.
Yeah. But most hurt people are just operating in survival mode. Yeah. If we can be a little bit empathetic to that part of the journey.
Absolutely.
And it is part of the journey, right? So how do you forgive yourself? How do you release it? How do you, what did you say? Bless it and release it?
Bless and release.
How do you bless and release it?
Oh,
Yeah.
Okay. So I just took it 3-4 different places. I'm like, all right, let me reel it in my own brain. Let's start here.
Okay.
What is guilt saying to you in that moment, if you don't mind
sharing?
Yeah.
Guilt is saying I should have done better. I should have been kinder. I should have been more considerate.
Okay. Is that helpful?
Yeah.
In this moment of that happened, I'm trying to move on. Is guilt helpful in that? What is that serving you in this moment of trying to do differently?
I think it helps because it pushes you to choose better. Like it pushes you to be better, to be kinder, to be more considerate of other people, to be more caring, to be all the things you weren't because you didn't know how. I think those are all the things that it gives you, I guess.
Okay. So I'm hearing a different voice actually from guilt.
Yeah.
Guilt is telling you the things you weren't.
Yes.
It's not telling you the things you want to be.
True.
The voice I'm hearing that's telling you what guilt served then, might have served then, maybe self-compassion. You mentioned the word kind. Yeah. Let's use kind.
Yeah.
What would kindness say in that moment about all the things that guilt is saying?
I think kindness would say that I didn't know better at the time. Yeah.
What else?
And that I need to be nicer to myself. And that, to what we were discussing earlier, the lesson has been learned. Is it okay, though, that it costs you and someone else something for you to learn that lesson?
So that's a different question. But so let's first land this one, right, and come to that.
Okay.
So between guilt of all the things you could have, should have, but didn't do, and kindness saying, look at all the things should have, could have, would have, but you didn't know better. and you're judging your past self for your current wisdom, and it's unfair, and you're not being nice. So be nice.
True.
Which one of those is going to be more helpful in moving you forward into the person you want to be?
I guess kindness.
Yeah, you don't sound so sure.
Yeah, no, you're right. No, you're right. It's kindness.
Kindness, right?
It's kindness.
So back to agency.
Yeah.
They're all your employees. They're all your workers. You get to decide who's more helpful in this moment.
Yeah.
We're not fighting guilt. We're inviting the most helpful employee at the table. So if I'm talking about a budget,
Yeah.
I need the accountant to tell me what we need to do.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. But we're here wasting our time with the engineer about our finances. It's true. So we're gonna get audited if we're taking advice from the engineer. And that's the thing, right?
They know a different kind of number.
Yes.
Yeah.
So again, it's not about how do I forget that those things happened. We receive, we accept, and who do I need in this moment to the bless and release is you get to decide who am I pulling into this meeting. Who's most helpful and equipped to help me through this thing. So kindness is going to give you that. And then maybe logic pops in, and then maybe all the things, right? The healing. So then you move into the direction you want to move into.
I love that.
Right?
Yeah.
So the second part, now I forgot it. Like the forgiving.
Yes. Oh, how do you forgive yourself?
How do you forgive yourself? How do you forgive other people?
Oh, I think you practice empathy and you understand where they're coming from. And you really said, oh, yeah. Obviously, that's what you're supposed to do yourself.
Nobody teaches us.
It's a good question.
Nobody teaches
How
us
to forgive ourselves.
how to do the things we do for others, for ourselves.
Yeah.
And even from a religious point of view.
Yeah.
The Bible literally says, pastor's kid coming out now. Love your neighbor as yourself.
Yeah.
And I heard somebody say that is always based on the assumption that we love ourselves. But from kindergarten to home, everybody teaches us, reinforces to treat others with kindness. We get celebrated when we are kind to others. I don't know about you. I've never had anybody ask me how I treat myself. Or is that actually my daughter one time called me out. So this was in school, and I'm raising 3 kids, and I'm doing running a nonprofit. Like, what is sleep? Yeah. And they woke up and like, Mom, did you even sleep? I was like, oh, just a couple hours. And she goes, you're being very rude to your body.
Oh no.
Like, what?
I love that. I love that.
And then because I'm teaching them the things I didn't get, and then they turn it around on me. I'm like, oh, gosh, I don't like that. Right? Nobody teaches us how to do the things we've learned to do for others.
For yourself.
And that's why I lead with self-compassion. Self-compassion teaches us to, one is with kindness, normalizing human experience. I'm a human having a human experience. So if I mess up, that's what humans do.
Yeah.
And we give others grace before we do that for ourselves because, we got to be better. So the same question of if we can access, how do we do that for me? I will start with, if my sister, my child, my best friend was sitting across from me, beating themselves up about their past, what would I tell them? And we always have the nicest things to say to others.
We're so kind to other people.
Oh, you did your best. Look how you got here.
It was all
like, I love you, right? And so it feels like this woohoo stuff of self-affirmation.
Yeah.
Or practicing those kind words because it doesn't come naturally. It's not reinforced in our society to just do those things for yourself. So the way you do it for others, how you do it for yourself.
I love that. Oh, yeah. Okay, I'm going to use that now from now on. Literally, just stop and think about how you would do it for someone else.
Right.
And I guess, like, when you've gone through kind of the stages of awareness, agency, action, I love that. And you're on this path of healing, and you're on this journey of healing, and you're relearning these patterns, you're building better behaviors, you're doing all the things you're supposed to do. it also costs you something.
Mm-hmm.
It starts to cost you relationships that weren't serving you, but you didn't know. It starts to cost you like your own self-image, because sometimes that can your entire identity can be wrapped around something.
Yes.
And all of a sudden it's just not as important anymore.
Mm-hmm.
How do you navigate that transition?
Mm.
And I think maybe first to affirm that it's a good thing, but it can feel so unsettling,
Mm-hmm.
especially if you get on this journey later in life. It can feel like it's too late.
Mm.
And for women especially, but I'm sure this applies for men too, but I think for women, it hits a special chord. We're always kind of being rushed through life.
Yes.
You know, it's like you're okay, when are you going to get married? When are you going to have kids? Yeah, when are you going to be exactly? When are you going to
Not
be a grand?
enoughness.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh yeah, like your clock is ticking, this is ticking, that is ticking. And so going through these kinds of experiences later in life is painful and jarring,
Mm-hmm.
especially for women.
Mm-hmm.
But then also, the truth about healing is that it never ends.
Yes.
And I don't know who taught us this, but some of us, most of us, feel like, oh, I'm supposed to go through this journey, and then I heal, and then, right into the sunset happiness.
Oh, of course.
Right?
Yes.
And apparently that's not how it works, I'm learning.
So I hear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm like, how do you manage the transition, the shift that happens in your life
Mm-hmm.
when you heal?
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay.
Right?
And so there are three things, there's 3 or 5 things going on at the same
2 to
time.
3, 5.
10. So the one part I kept hearing,
Yeah.
and this is usually the beginning of, again, that tension,
Yeah.
is when we say words like must,
Mm.
have to, supposed to,
Oof.
should.
Yep.
Those are little indicators that any sentence that has that,
Mm-hmm.
we should pause and say, according to whom. Those are indicators of that you're just regurgitating what's been fed to you
Yeah.
by whatever system that is at play.
Ooh. Supposed to have to.
Have to, must, should. We don't gotta do nothing but stay black and die. Is that Chris Rock said? Just stay black and die or pay taxes. Even taxes you don't have to, right? So anytime you feel like there is a must and a have to and should,
Yeah.
it's time for
According
pause.
to who?
According to who?
Oh, wow. That's powerful.
And that will help you start identifying those messages and patterns that are like so ingrained, so automatic, that you don't even realize you're just playing out the role you were told you should play.
Yeah, should.
Must play. Have to. Okay.
Yeah.
So that was one part I heard in there.
Oh, I love that.
Then I also heard you use the word what it costs you.
Mm.
And I think that's come up across all the questions, right? Because again, we're seeing healing as a price. Okay, no, before I go there, that dress costs you something. Mm-hmm. Probably a lot of money. Looks really nice. Thank you. And we learned, shout out to our Kenya designer. Yes. It's gorgeous.
All right, thank you.
But when you walked out of there, were you thinking about the price you paid for the dress or the pretty dress you got and you got to wear here today?
The pretty dress, because I tried it on and I was like convinced it was made for me.
Right? I agree.
Thank you.
You should get up and should know. It's gorgeous, right?
Yeah.
Everything in life costs us something.
Oh.
But what we're getting out of it when it's worth the money, we don't even think about the price. We're thinking about what we're getting. So when we start viewing healing as this disruption or this terrible thing, or the people we lost, if they had to go, that is probably a price that we needed to pay for the life we're saying we want. And clearly those were not the people serving you on this journey.
Yeah.
Just like the money, exchanging money for this beautiful dress. It's like we're exchanging these toxic humans for healing.
Yeah.
It's not a bad exchange. The bad exchange was choosing to stay in a poisonous, toxic environment for our well being and life and happiness and healing. But when you decide this dress is worth the price,
Yeah.
you probably don't even remember how much you paid because you're like, but look at
Oh.
the pretty dress. Cute. Right? I'm cute. It's cute.
I feel pretty.
Right. So cost is not a bad thing if it's serving a life, an outcome, the ROI in y'all's language out there, right?
ROI.
Right. What's my return on investment?
It's true.
Right?
You're right.
I'm investing in healing and I'm going to create a life that I am proud of, that I feel peace, whatever your values are for this life.
Yeah.
If it's not in alignment, that's where distress happens.
Okay.
And I saw some little YouTube thing of a woman, somebody on stage somewhere asking, when do you know to let go of toxic family members? And the person answered, how much poison do you have to take before it kills you? How do you know how much you should take before it kills you?
Oof.
Right?
I love that.
Same. I was like, mind blown.
Yeah.
Just because they're family, right? Nobody's going to intentionally
right.
microdose poison. That's when it's happening. But we can microdose healing, microdose self-life, self-care. Because they're taking us to like the life we said we want.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
I love the reframing of like, what life do you want? And that kind of being the setting or the background around the work that you do. Because then it's like you're moving towards something.
Yes.
Because sometimes healing, work, all of it, it can sound like a sentence, you know?
Yeah.
But you're like, oh, I have to serve my time, I have to do this.
Right.
Yeah.
Which fear.
I
It should not be
know.
a prison sentence.
It should not be a prison sentence. And so if you're working towards the life that you want, you're moving towards something that you like aspire to, then I love that framework. Then it makes sense that you're putting in all of this work and effort, because you're right, everything costs us something.
Even staying the way we are is costing us something. So which price are you willing
to pay?
Because
I think that's the big thing I see a lot of people struggle with, and I've struggled with too, which is like the notion that staying is costing you, and it's usually costing you more.
Yes.
Especially after you've had that awareness moment where you're like,
now I see it.
Right? Yeah. It's like you could not see, and then someone give you glasses for the first time.
Yes.
And you're like, what is happening?
Pink.
Right?
Can't pretend anymore. Right.
But it's true.
Yeah.
Wow.
There's that quote that I'm totally not going to get right, but when the pain of staying becomes greater than the fear of change, then change happens.
Yeah.
So we get comfortable until we know.
Yeah.
And that gets too uncomfortable for us to be with. And some people still stay.
I love that.
But
yeah.
Sooner or later, yeah. You're paying something regardless.
To stay. You're paying something to stay.
Yeah.
And you're right. Everything in life costs us something. So healing costs us something.
But it's not worth the price.
Yeah, it's not a price we should be afraid to pay if it's giving us the life that we want.
Oh, quotable moment.
Ooh. I'm just repeating your words to you. But I love that.
Yeah.
And I guess maybe one thing I'm curious to get your perspective on, because I think it's something we all struggle with. The second part of kind of the 3-step process you were talking about, awareness, agency, action. A lot of us will get stuck in relationships. Either it's romantic, or it's familial, or it's friendships. And we'll say, oh no, I can change them.
Biggest lie ever told.
Yes. And I struggle with that notion, especially when you start to understand the complexity that comes with healing. And to your point, getting to the stage of awareness, which is usually some level of disruptive event, and then getting to a point of agency, like using your emotions as your informants, and then actually transforming it into action. you cannot do that for another person, can you?
Right, right. And, and it's that awareness that makes you stop playing victim in your own patterns that you've created.
Love that.
And so I think the reason I really love this framework is it gives you accountability. So, oh, but he's so, but he, but she, but yeah, they are. And normally most people, right, what Maya Angelou say, when they show you who they are, believe them.
Yes. The first time,
So
preferably.
that part. So you chose to believe them.
Yeah.
And sometimes they do a good job at being PR, right? This is not victim blaming at all. A lot of people end up in, I'm a divorced woman, so I woke up someday, I'm like, okay, somehow I landed here, but now it's my job to get out.
Yeah.
And do better the life I want to live, right? And so it's hard. We're not saying this outside of the realness of life.
Yeah.
People sometimes have really difficult choices, right? Because some of this is also out of privilege. Sometimes it's financial, sometimes it's safety, physical safety, children, right?
Yeah.
We all get stuck for different reasons. But, and not but, and there is, when you get to that place of stopping to think again, finding who's most useful to you to make that move, the guilt and shame of what will people say if I get out of this, if I cut off a parent or a toxic uncle or auntie. Yeah. Well, the rest of my family, we're going to have a lot of meetings. Yeah. Church, I can tell you how many pastors and people talking to me about staying in a marriage that they didn't know anything about or what was happening to me for me. And in that time of my life, actually, this is the first time I'm saying this publicly. Oh, that's weird.
Okay.
Okay, it's happening.
Welcome.
I just noticed like, oh. But before making that decision, which is because I had three little kids and a chosen son who was a little older. I went to therapy again.
Therapy.
I was like,
Shout out to therapy
again, to shift how I see things.
Yeah.
To get rid of, not rid of, but to work through my anger, the grief, the things, right? And then once I was in a better place, before making any decisions, because I did not want it to be an emotional one. Yeah. And if I don't have my why, I will not be able to, I don't have to, but I won't be able to explain that to somebody else or to take on other people's opinions of my situation that they're not a part of. Yeah. And I got my voice during that time. I was so proud of me. Sometimes it's women or whoever from the community coming to me to talk to me about, oh, that's what marriage is. And I'm like, hold up, what are my kids' names?
Oh, I love that.
Most of them didn't even, maybe one, they knew the first name. Like if you don't have even the information that's dear near, like what right do you have to my life or telling me how I should live it?
Amen.
And they would have nothing else to say.
I love that.
What really got me to make the decision I made, and when we're in that place, I would ask three important questions. If I think actually you said we had this conversation before. One was, if I was dying tomorrow, yeah, is this how I would want to go out? Would I regret this? Yeah. Right, staying or leaving, that is. Two, if this was my daughter or son or best friend, yeah, what would I tell them to do? Because we are good with the wisdom for somebody else.
For everybody else. Right, with the wisdom, with the care.
All the things, right? Yeah. And then the last one was, if I were to write an autobiography, would I want to leave this chapter out? Or in? If the whole world would read this, would I be proud of this chapter? Which decision would make me be proud?
Oh, I love that.
So the easy way is to stay and raise the kids and put on the face, because we were both like very public facing people and all that crap. But the one that I would be proud of was the harder one. And I would rather sleep at night and have the peace and do all the work toward the life I say I want.
Yeah.
And that clears all the other nuance and we make things way more complicated
We
than they should
do.
be.
We do.
Right?
And I also feel like a lot of the time we forget that your life is about you.
It's
Your life
yours.
is about you.
And when we learn that most people don't think about us,
Yeah.
it frees us.
Yeah.
Right? Like, how often are you thinking about who's doing what when it's in the news? Yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't sit there. I'm like, I wonder what their thoughts are right
Yeah.
now.
And even if you think about it, it's a very fleeting
Very
1-second thought.
fleeting.
It's not
Yes.
everything.
And when it's good rumors and gossip, you'll talk about it and you move on.
Exactly.
We're so self-absorbed.
And I feel like we look like or we act like we are in the middle of everything. And like that everybody is watching everything that we are doing, which is crazy.
And the last part on this is also, you talked about changing people thinking we can, is we see the world as we are, not as it is.
Mm.
And anytime you're having those conversations, it is, again, there's 3 conversations always happening. Even right now, it's what I think I'm saying, what I'm actually saying, and what you're hearing.
Yeah.
And we're always doing that dance.
Yeah.
But we only hear it from where we are as people. So we will make all the excuses, we'll do all the things because we've set up our way of looking at life. So, yeah.
Come back to yourself.
Getting out of your own way.
Yeah. Come back to you because it's about you.
All about you, for you, by you.
Yeah. Literally.
Sorry.
Your life is for you. No, that was great. Because my head also did the same thing. I'm glad.
Only mine comes out.
I'm glad we did that. I'm glad we did that. And maybe to wrap this conversation, because I think we've touched on a lot of big things.
Yes.
But maybe one thing I'd love to end on is if you could give yourself like one piece of advice, either at the beginning or the middle of this journey of unlearning or transitioning towards softness, what would you tell yourself?
Girl.
I know. Have to hit you with the hard one.
Yeah.
But also want it for like people that are kind of in that right now, because it can be so isolating to go through this alone.
2 things. I try not to overthink these deep questions because then I'm like, oh, it should be
Please
profound.
don't. No, I want something that just comes.
The 2 things that came right away as soon as you asked that just now.
Yeah.
One was nothing in life is that deep.
Ooh, yes.
It is not that deep.
That part.
And the second one is everything, these 2 shall pass. Like everything passes. The good, the bad, the ugly, the happy, the sad.
Yeah.
And the moment I learned that, I can ride the wave.
Yeah.
Because all waves crash on the shore eventually.
Yeah.
And it's the fighting it and going against it that creates the turmoil. So it's not that serious. What is that saying? That life is not that serious. We all don't get out of it alive.
It's true.
It's dark, but it's so true.
It's true.
So when it's not that deep, I'm going to choose what I want to do for the life I want to create.
I love that.
It's a short one.
Yeah.
Make it count.
100%. And and like kind of the whole ethos of this conversation, everything we've touched on throughout this conversation, I think the only thing I would also say, because 100% agree with that, is it's all a part of it. Everything. The disruption, the awareness, the journey to agency, the journey to action, the learning, the relearning. It's all a part of life. It will happen over and over again at different parts of your life.
Yeah. It's cyclical.
It is.
And do you mind if I read this quote?
No, not at all.
About one of my learnings recently around, I think it's a quote by Nicola somebody. And it goes, growing up, I never knew a relaxed woman. Successful women, yes. Productive women, plenty. Anxious and afraid and apologetic women, heaps of them. But relaxed women, at ease women, women who aren't afraid to take up space in the world, women who prioritize rest and pleasure and play, women who give themselves unconditional permission to relax without guilt, without apology, without feeling like they need to earn it.
Ooh.
I'm not sure I've ever met a woman like that, but I would like to become one. I would like us all to become one.
Amen. I love that.
Soft life.
Yeah.
Unapologetic authenticity.
Yes. And that's a perfect way to wrap this. Thank you so
Amen.
much for your time, Tabitha. Dr. Tabitha. She became a doctor, so we have to call her doctor now. That's the rules.
Respect now.
Thank you for your time. Thank you for coming all this way. And thank you for sitting with us and being so open and vulnerable and transparent and giving all of us like useful frameworks and things we can work on, things we can work through, and being so generous with your examples and time.
Thank you.
I appreciate you.
Yeah,
Thank you so much. And for all of you, remember, you are the author and editor of your own life, so get to it. Thank you. Yay!
That was good.
Yay! She came up with our catchphrase.